Hello and welcome to Business Class. My name is Shantanu Prakash, and today on the show we have a very interesting couple, Nirupesh and Mercy, who are the co-founders of a very unique company, the Bangalore Watch Company. The Bangalore Watch Company is a manufacturer of fine watches. In fact, India's first and only manufacturer of fine watches, which is putting India on the global watchmaking map. So, welcome to the show,
Thank
Aviation Mercy. I remember that when I was growing up, I used to have a HMT watch. And I think from the days of HMT to now, Bangalore Watch Company, things have really come a very long way. But if we sort of go back into your own history, you were a top executive in Akamai, a tech company, earning a fat paycheck. Both of you together have been many places in the world. So, what inspired you to come back to Bangalore and enter the watchmaking business? Has your family been connected with watchmaking in some form or the other ever?
No, not at all. Our families were never connected with watchmaking whatsoever. As you said, we worked in the tech industry. We traveled around the world, but in 2016 we took a break from our tech careers, trying to figure out what's next. And during that time, we were also impressed by all the fine watchmakers in Hong Kong when we lived there, and we began to ask the question why there was no fine watch company in India that was telling stories from India. That was a thought process behind the origin of Bangalore Watch Company. But that didn't start right there. We took 2 years of research and trying to figure out even if there is a market to do something like this. And at the end of our sabbatical in 2016, we started the brand.
So, Nirupesh and Mercy, both of you met when you were really young.
Yeah.
You were both in college together
Yes.
in Madurai,
Yeah.
small little temple town
Yeah.
in Tamil Nadu,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
And I believe that you have the quintessential middle class upbringing.
Correct.
So tell us a little bit more about your growing up days. Like what inspired you at that point in time, and how did you even manage to get this big tech job in Akamai? And you've been a traveling spouse with him in sort of so many different parts of the world. So what sort of shaped the early part of your life, and how did you become an entrepreneur, and that too making watches, which is not something that is the first obvious choice that comes to a founder. I'm going to start a watch company.
No.
Right. So tell us sort of in greater detail about this whole journey of yours.
Right. So, I mean, as you said, we had very small, modest upbringing. We lived in small towns. My dad had a sales job. I was born and raised in Chennai. Mercy's father was a state government servant.
Yeah, and he worked in a government employee as a tahsildar. So I brought up in a place where we go to only government schools. My father is a government employee, and he decided to send us to only government schools. And I've learned there is no connection with me to talk in English or anything, because it's only a local language we studied and everything. But when I started the career, it was very difficult.
That's what brought us here, right, to Bangalore, right? So when we moved here, we had very modest vision, or aim rather. We just wanted to get a job in Bangalore. We'd be happy just with jobs. But that's what brought us to Bangalore, and we've been in Bangalore ever since. It's almost 20 years now.
Yeah, it's 20 years.
The city's home, but we moved in and out. We lived in the US for a while, lived in South Korea for a while, lived in Hong Kong for a while. And especially when we lived in Hong Kong is when we took a fascination for fine watches from around the world. Anybody that's been to Hong Kong knows that it's a mecca for watch brands. Anywhere you turn, you'll find a watch brand. Not just the brands that we know in India like Omega or Tag Heuer or Panerai, but Jaeger LeCoultre, Vacheron, Constantine, some of the best watchmakers from around the world. And all of these people, all of these brands put in the level of artisanship that we find here in the jewelry industry in India. Mm-hmm. That was our first thought process. We said, why is nobody making fine watches from India as much as there is such a big jewelry craftsmanship that's available in India? The other thing was that all these watchmakers were telling stories from their country or their culture. An example is if you look at Omega, they tell the story of the moon watch because that's the watch that Neil Armstrong wore on the moon. They've been telling that story for decades now. These kind of stories have never been told from India. That was the inspiration behind Bangalore Watch Company, to produce high quality, world class watches, but tell stories from India.
So this decision, Nirupesh, to take your love for watches and transform that into a business,
Yeah,
wouldn't have been very easy.
not at all.
Considering that
Yeah,
you are, I guess you look 35,
yeah, a little over that.
around that, and in some sense you are at the peak of your career, and by all accounts, fantastic job. Living the dream life for millions of people, different parts of the world, and I think you had everything going for you. So, how did this decision sort of take shape in your mind? That look, I'm going to abandon everything and I'm going to become an entrepreneur and make artisanal watches
Right.
in some sense.
Yeah.
How difficult was this decision?
Yeah. I mean, from the outside, maybe it looks like, we both woke up one day and decided to quit everything and start a watch company, but that's obviously not how it was. The first point came when our assignment was coming to an end in Hong Kong and we were asked to move to another country to take up another assignment. That's when we started thinking, are we going to do what we did for the last 10 years? And we're really good at what we did. Are we going to do the same thing for the next 10 years? Or are we going to pause now and ask the question of, do we want to do something else for the next 10, 15 years, which was going to be the prime of our careers, right? So that point came in 2016. So we took a break. We took a sabbatical, and my employer was nice enough to let me take a break for 6 months for me to make a decision of what I want to do next. And over that period of time, we were considering a few options. One was obviously going back to the tech world and taking another job and being comfortable in the journey that we were having over the last 10 years. And the other was to do something different, to come back to India, spend time with family, be closer to family. At the same time, do something on our own together. We've been together since when we were very young. We really enjoy each other's company and the strength of each other. We play to it. And we really wanted to do something together. So the watch brand was one of those ideas that eventually was decided to be the next.
So you went through a whole process of figuring out what would be the right venture
Absolutely.
to get into.
Absolutely. Yes.
You started this company with your own seed capital.
Yes, we
Many
did.
people live their entrepreneurial dreams with other people's money.
OPM.
But you put your own money behind the venture.
Yes, we did.
And we all have a habit of saving up in life, especially middle class people who don't come from huge privilege.
Correct.
When they first start making money, they said, let's buy these mutual funds, let's invest in this, let's buy an apartment so that we have security.
Yeah.
And this whole thing about the middle class Indian existence is we need to secure ourselves.
Correct.
And our future. And here you were at the age of 35, actually taking all your precious savings and putting it into this venture that before I met you, I couldn't imagine somebody setting up a company to make watches in India.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that the watches only came from Switzerland or Japan or something like that. So I said, really, I want to meet these crazy people. Who are these people
Right.
who are making watches in India?
Right.
So this decision that you're going to actually put your family security at risk in this, were you very sure that this is going to turn out to be successful?
Well, sounds like a trick question. No, look, I think there were a few trends that we noticed that were going in the right direction. One was consumption in India was growing, right? Barring the recent commentary around consumption, especially consumption with disposable income has been growing over the last decade. The watchmaking industry is growing. It's a 10,000 crore industry. Especially the segment that we are playing in between 25,000 rupees and 1 lakh rupees continues to grow at a CAGR of 20 to 22% every year. So A, it's a growing industry. And B, we got a very good confidence from the fact that there is a newfound passion around Indian origin brands that are claiming to produce world-class products. We can see it all around us today. Take companies in the clothing industry like Bombay Shirt Company or Nicobar from the Good Earth group. Take single origin coffee from Blue Tokai or Flying Squirrel. Take perfumes now. There's a company called Bombay Perfumery, which is producing world-class perfumes out of here. Take single malt whiskey. So all around us, we see a trend where Indians, both in India and overseas, who are well-traveled, well-read, are passionate about Indian origin stories, are beginning to support Indian origin brands that claim to produce world-class products. In that, in that way, we're perhaps the first ones to do something with watches. So this was a very encouraging trend for us. And that's what made us to sort of go and commit a large, significant portion of our life savings into this to bootstrap the business last year.
So Nirupesh, watches is something that you buy or you wear because you want to make a statement about yourself. If you buy Rolex, you're a certain kind of person. So if I were to buy a watch from the Bangalore Watch Company, what would that say about me as a person? What is the statement that comes out of it?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, Shantanu, because the consumption pattern is also changing right now. If you look at watches, for instance, a vast majority of watches are still purchased today because the person that's buying the watch wants the people around them or their network to recognize what they've purchased. Oh, you bought a Rolex, you must be doing very well. That's kind of the statement that they're making without obviously making a statement by wearing an expensive watch that everybody knows. There is also an increasing trend now of inconspicuous consumption, where people are saying, look, I am really happy where I am economically, and I don't really have to wear a statement piece on my wrist for somebody else to know that I'm doing well. What I wear needs to matter to me. It needs to appeal to me. It needs to have a personal connection to me. And that's the kind of products and services that people have come to use. As I mentioned a few examples before, that's the same reason why they go consume from those brands. So when somebody buys a watch from the Bangalore Watch Company, we say they get to wear a piece of home.
But that would only apply to people who live in Bangalore then?
No, because the kind of stories that we tell from Bangalore Watch Company are stories from India. The first story was a mid-century inspired dress watch. The second story that we're saying now as we speak is an Indian Air Force inspired story.
And that's the watch you're wearing?
That is the watch I'm wearing right now.
So I think if you can zoom the camera on this watch, tell us something interesting about this watch. You were showing it to me earlier. It has a very interesting image on the back side of the watch.
Correct.
Would you like to take it off and show it to us?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if you can get it here in the camera.
So this is a watch that's inspired by the Indian Air Force.
Yes, it is.
It's as Indian as it can be.
Correct.
And especially now that the Air Force has been in the news.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about how you conceptualize the watch.
Yeah.
And it says a lot about your business strategy for the company as well.
Yes, it does.
So let us know a little bit more about that.
Yes, it does. I've been an aviation buff since when I was young. The first time I saw a fighter plane, I was probably 5 years old, right? And I've been hooked to fighter planes since then. And this whole fascination for watches when we lived overseas, there's a huge trend of aviation watches as well. Take IWC as a brand. They make aviation watches. They make watches like Top Gun, Spitfire. Spitfire watch collection is dedicated to a World War II plane. Top Gun is the US Air Force pilot flight training school in the US. So if I'm spending a few lakhs and buying a high quality timepiece, why would I buy something that says something about a US Air Force flight training school versus something about the Indian Air Force? That was the logic and the vision behind creating Indian Air Force inspired watch collection.
So that is a logic I can certainly buy. But if I look at Mercy's wrist, you have a very feminine looking watch that has diamonds around it. Are they real diamonds?
No, it's Swarovski crystals. And this is the first collection which we launched last year, which is Renaissance. And this is a women's version of Renaissance, which is called Stree for women. And this is an understated, very classic and dress kind of work piece. So the first one is we thought we can give a homage to HMT and their version when they were closed down. We wanted to do something from India. So the first watch we wanted to dedicate to HMT and the second collection which we were trying with the aviation line. So the stories from India we wanted to just tell through.
So all this sounds very creative and very inspiring that somebody has had the courage to stand up and tell these stories. So how has business been doing so far? I know you launched in April of 2018.
Correct.
And you only sell online.
Correct.
No showrooms, it's not available in retail.
No, it's not.
So what's the logic behind that? Because don't you think people would like to try on the watch, see it, touch and feel it before they buy something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I mean, the way the brand is growing now is of a high quality brand that produces limited collections. For example, our first collection was only produced in 500 pieces. So now 500 pieces, in putting things in perspective, Titan produces 15 million watches a year, right? And again, just putting things in perspective for somebody to understand what 500 pieces mean against a brand like Titan that produces 15 million pieces a year. 500 pieces is a very small number of watches. And we're targeting mainly watch enthusiasts who already are in the habit of buying Swiss watches, that understand watches very well. They don't necessarily need to touch and feel the watch before they buy. So when I tell an enthusiast that the watch's size is 40 millimeters, they understand very well what 40 millimeters will look on their wrist. And if I tell them the size, the thickness is 11 millimeters, they understand very well what 11 millimeters will look on their wrist. So that's the kind of audience we're looking at. Also, people are now beginning to spend more online. The online spend average ticket sizes have been growing. Look at jewelry companies like Carrot Lane and Bluestone. They've been selling jewelry for a few years now online. So it's no different from that. Right?
But Nirupesh, it's one thing to sell to someone who understands watches.
Yeah.
And in that sense, they would salute you for launching a watch company from India.
Correct.
But think about a trader in Agra who owns a Mercedes car. He has the money. Do you think someone like him would be attracted to buying your watch?
Yeah.
The question I'm really asking is, how do you grow your business from something that caters to a watch connoisseur or an enthusiast and a hobbyist to something that mainstream people would love to buy?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think the trader from Agra who drives a Mercedes, in all likelihood, is still going to buy his or her Rado at the end of the day. No matter what kind of watch we make, they're still going to stick to their Rado. Brands have been around for decades now, and they've created this brand awareness and recall that new brands like us will take a long time to get to. But that being said, it's also important to go beyond the connoisseurs and enthusiasts and build a brand for the normal people as well. So like any other brand, there is a vision of an omni-channel approach. Eventually we'll get to spaces where people can come in and experience the brand, but I think it's going to take a few years before we get there.
So I think it depends a lot, Nirupesh, on your ambition of starting this company in the first place.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to Nirupesh&Mercy, who were this highly successful power couple and traveling all over the world. And one day they decide that we don't want to do the same thing for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So we want to start a company.
Right.
Now you started a company. So your dream has become a reality.
Correct.
Now what are your goals? Do you want to make money? Do you want to earn more fame and reputation? Do you want to be known in the world as, this watchmaking couple from Bangalore who doing something impossible that nobody else has dreamt of doing? What are the goals that are driving you now?
Look, the popular worldview of India is of snake charmers, elephants, crowded markets, colors. Our worldview of India is of women flying fighter planes, the 21st century view of India. It's very different, right? And what our vision was when we left everything and really wanted to start something creative like this was to go and tell the world about what our worldview of India looks like, the 21st century worldview of India. And an increasing number of Indians are sort of rallying behind that idea, right? And the fact that we have the opportunity to create something new like this and give people the opportunity to own creative products like this is what gives us the high.
But that's what's called being in a lifestyle business.
Correct.
You enjoy what you're doing,
right?
And that's good enough for you.
Correct.
But do you think a business like you would be attractive to an investor who's probably going to look at Titan and say, look, they do 15 million. you're rolling out limited edition pieces of 500.
Right.
That may be good for your ego and your personal bank balance, but how is it creating a big, vibrant business out of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, you have to look at the watchmaking space. Some of the most valuable watch companies in the world do not produce 15 million pieces. Some of the most valuable watch companies in the world, and when I say valuable, I mean by sales volume and company value, which is derivative of the sales volume, they make no more than 10,000 to 15,000 pieces a year. Right? So that's the vision for us. We're going to put India on the world map in watchmaking as a heritage luxury brand from India that produces world-class watches, but with stories from India, not by volume, but by value. Right? We'll follow the same route that some of the most valuable watch companies have taken.
That's a really fantastic vision. But when you run a business, there are day-to-day challenges of running a business. There are employees, and India is not the most friendly country to launch a business.
Yeah.
Right. So 2 questions. One is they are co-founders now. Okay. For the longest time, you as a wife, you were traveling and supporting him. In some sense, you're still supporting, his passion and his vision. But now that you're, a co-founder of the company, how do both of you divide roles and responsibilities? And does that sort of make things awkward sometimes at home when the business conversation from the office spills over to the dining table? Has that, this question really for you, Mercy, has that improved your relationship with him, or has it stressed both of you out more?
It didn't stress us, but sometimes when he need a coffee in the morning, he didn't care about whether milk is available, coffee powder is available, nothing. All he cares about, I need a coffee before I go to the call and something like that.
Somebody needs to run the home.
Yeah. And those are the times when it's really difficult for me to manage both the business as well as home and all the stuff, because that's one part is very challenging, and I take care of all the customer care issues and quality assurance because I have from the background of quality assurance engineer. So I just do all those things and customer interaction and stuff. And Nirupesh will take care of all the designing and interaction with the vendors and stuff. But the family, the relationship has become stronger. But sometimes I get really frustrated because it's the conversation just goes on until the dinner table and even in the bed sometimes. And I was like, please, I want just me time to check out something and some gossips in the industry and stuff. So yeah, that's quite a journey for us.
I don't think it's any different from any couple that got into business together. They'll have their ups and downs.
So, do you think that's a great thing that you actually both of you co-founded this together?
We'll answer separately. Do you think it's a great thing?
It's good and bad, but so far it's very interesting because you're sharing the success, and you can feel the success when we both are raising something really good, and
it's like your own baby, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. Yes.
So you're nurturing it together.
Of course, but I also think that it's really an advantage of doing business if couples are doing business, right? Because I think one of the biggest challenges a lot of entrepreneurs face today is finding a co-founder. I think a lot of startup founders have talked about it openly as well, right? I had a co-founder that didn't work out, so things fell apart. And even investment decisions are based on the team, right? And I think if a strong couple get into business together, that one big hurdle is already passed. You know the strengths, weaknesses, you can play to each other's strengths and weaknesses. That's a big advantage in my opinion.
So what kind of readjustments did both of you have to make to this new life of yours?
Yeah.
Perhaps it was about, earlier you're splurging on certain things. Now you have to sort of hold back because you never know how much money you need for your company. The investment scenario is uncertain at best. So have you been making those mental adjustments to your own consumption pattern?
Yeah. I mean, when we were doing really well in our careers, most of our spending, or you use the word splurging, I think the only thing we splurged was in travel. We traveled quite a lot, and now we don't travel at all. The only time we travel is when we have to go visit our suppliers overseas to do QC and inspection now.
But do you think that the positive strokes that you get from perhaps your customers or from friends who probably applaud you and celebrate you for what you've done, only you can know the struggle that you're going through.
Yeah.
But to the outside world, now you are doing the glamorous thing today of living the life of an entrepreneur. So do you think that the halo around your head right now, that you're owner of your own business, that makes up for all the pain and the struggle that, on the uncertainty that you have to deal with?
I think so. Yeah, there's no high in the world that's better than seeing an email from a customer, how much it means to them to open that package and look at that product that you've built. That's the kind of high that we get each day, every day, when we receive emails and phone calls from our customers worldwide.
And we have shipped our watches for 29 countries so far.
Wow,
And
fantastic.
Yeah, and that's like a very successful thing for any brand who just proudly says an Indian brand, just export to all other places.
Yeah.
Like 29 countries is not a...
So how many people in Madurai have bought your watch?
Still they are conservative people and they just, do things.
That's a really very heartwarming story of entrepreneurship. So certainly we wish you all the success, because you're exporting a piece of India.
Yes.
And establishing an Indian flag in an industry which most people thought that, this is one thing that India can't do, is make fine watches.
Yeah.
So do you think that at some time in the future, your watchmaking skills and your creative imagination can even challenge some of the big brands that we hear about, like a Rolex or a Patek, for example? Is that a crazy ambition that you have?
It is a crazy ambition, but at the same time we're also being realistic a bit, because Rolex has been around for decades now, and a brand like Rolex isn't built overnight. So it's a long journey ahead, but we're very optimistic.
But you started it.
We started it, and we're on it, and we're very optimistic about it.
Fantastic.
So Shantanu, what do you think about building consumer businesses in India?
So Nirupesh, firstly, it's really a brave thing to build a consumer business in a country with 1 billion people. But that's honestly the most exciting things that you can ever do, is to have your own brand that people recognize, a brand that becomes sort of as famous as a Godrej or a Titan, for example.
Yeah.
Everybody knows these brands.
Right.
But it requires a lot of money. It requires a lot of perseverance.
Right.
And I think what is more important, that it requires a lot of integrity.
Right.
And the feeling that customers can trust your brand.
Right.
And I'm sure that brands that are born out of a founder's passion for excellence and for making sure that you follow ethical rules and principles, it's a matter of time.
Right.
Whether it could take you 5 years, it could take you 10 years. But one day, people are going to recognize that this brand stands for trust, it stands for quality, it stands for, ethical behavior, it stands for something unique. And the fact that in your company, you've chosen to tell unique stories about India, I think that's a positioning that Indians love, because, we are back to this phase as a country where we are proud of who we are patriotic as a nation, and we want to make a statement about the country as well. So it's a great marriage of your business ambition and where we are transitioning as a country and as a society. And when you have so many consumers in India that are only getting richer over a period of time, I don't think you can go wrong.
Right. Well, a follow up on that actually is, if you look at least our parents' generations, as you rightly said, they'll say if it's from Tata, it can't go wrong.
Yeah.
So trust was the biggest thing in building a consumer business. But if you ask a 10 or 15-year-old today, what are the brands that they know? If when we were 10 or 15 years, we would know Titan or Raymond as a consumer brand. But a 10 or 15-year-old today probably knows brands like Flipkart or Paytm, right? So do you think the whole trust being the champion still applies today in the world of online consumer businesses?
I think it probably applies more in the world of online. Because in the world of offline, you actually feel and touch the product before you buy.
Right.
The world of online is only about trust.
Right.
And while, Paytms of the world or the Flipkarts of the world will be this over-encompassing conglomerate.
Yeah.
They'll have, millions of satisfied customers.
Right.
But there's also have a few 100,000 unsatisfied
Correct.
customers. In your kind of product, which is very boutique, which is very artisanal, which is caters to a certain kind of consumer who appreciates every little detail
Right.
of what you're doing. I think it is challenging to build that entire brand halo in an online environment.
Correct.
But for products like yours, I think today online is the channel. So I think the channel is absolutely right. But you have to work the extra mile in terms of
Creating the trust.
creating the trust, regaining the trust every day,
Yeah.
Right.
providing fantastic customer service.
Correct.
And then there is social media.
Yes.
So when people start talking about you
Right.
on Instagram or other kind of social media, you know that you have arrived. When people do it on their own, and they're not paid influencers, they're satisfied customers who post a picture of your watch on Twitter and say, I bought this watch that celebrates MiG 21,
Right.
and they tag you. I mean, that's got to be another level of high. I'm sure that's already happening, right?
Yes. We've got a crazy following in Instagram at the moment.
Fantastic. The story of Nirupesh and Mercy is interesting in many more ways than one. Here is an example of a very successful corporate executive who got bored of what he was doing. He wanted the next 10 years of his life to be very different from the past 15, 20 years, and decided to make a plunge into the unknown. If Nirupesh had started a software technology business, that would still be understandable. But he set up a business to make luxury watches in Bangalore. Now that's got to be a leap of faith. And in some sense, I think that it proves to me that there are no barriers to what you can do. An economics graduate can become the director of a hardcore tech company. Somebody who's the director of a hardcore tech company can quit that job and start a watchmaking company, that too at the age of 35, and inspire his wife to join him as the co-founder of his company. So I think this is a great message in the Bangalore Watch Company story, that nothing is really impossible if you've set your heart on doing it, you're willing to make adjustments to your life. And I think the message that the Bangalore Watch Company story sort of gives us is that there is short-term pain, but if you endure it for long-term gain, all's well in the end. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.